Okay, all. Hi there. We're back again. Next up, we have Ray Redacted for you. Ray's been a really big supporter of Bacon One, good friend of the band. Been very vocal and helped us get to where we are with the money. So, good morning, Ray.
Good morning to everyone out there. Good afternoon to anyone in Asia. We have just crossed the halfway point in our live telecast podcast fundraisers, and we are certainly hoping to reach the halfway point on our goals as well very, very shortly.
That we are. So, you've told us that you've got quite an action-packed agenda of things you want to talk about.
Yeah, let me start off with my own Bob Geldof moment. I already offered to the community that I would match any donations of £133.70. Made that offer without realizing that GoFundMe doesn't allow people to donate 70 pence. It's only around 1,000. So any of the ones that are 133, I will be matching those, and in the next hour, I'll be matching any donations whatsoever that hit the side. So if you are half asleep on Twitch right now and you want to just make a donation for £2 or £3 during this talk, please do so, because we definitely want to keep this momentum up as we go into the second half. So, but Mike, yes, you're right. I did have a few things that I wanted to talk about, because I am very old. I'm an old school hacker. The kind of, I call us the War Games generation, meaning that we were pre-teens when the movie War Games came out in 1984.
Sure.
And I was going to give a nice little history of phreaking and a lot of the people that were there, but I've been listening to the BeerCon podcast for about 10 hours now, and I've heard a lot of things. I've kind of decided that I want to talk about something else, which I haven't really heard that much about. And that is this. We as a community, as an InfoSec community, there are about 3 million of us. There's 2.8 million workers in the cybersecurity field, okay? And if we think in terms of how big Twitter InfoSec is, even if we're being extremely generous, okay, we're talking about under 300,000 people. And then of those 300,000 people, there's probably maybe 500 that are particularly vocal or particularly well known. And so when we talk about community issues and community building and a lot of these things, it's really important to understand that what we see on the surface, even in the Mini Hats Club Discord, is the absolute small percentage of the very, very small percentage of the entire community, period, right? So we're talking about, significantly less than 10% of everyone who works in InfoSec will ever attend a con at all, okay? Hopefully this counts as a con, so maybe we would be getting that number up.
Yeah.
And Twitter is not a statistically significant reflection of the community. Twitter is a representation of a very specific type of member of the community, right? And I think that is, I heard several folks talk about cybersecurity shortage, the talent shortage, certainly the need for diverse viewpoints and things like that. That is one of the biggest drivers that I think is extremely important when we talk about growing this industry from 3 million to 7 million people in the next few years, is we have to open it up. We have to get people with different ability levels, different underrepresented communities, certainly increase the diversity for people of color and LGBTQI, all of those types of things, because it's simply a matter of survival. And we absolutely are better the more diverse we are, right? So I just kind of wanted to plug that in there. You have any thoughts on that?
I completely agree. And it's interesting, isn't it? Jenny talked about the UK community circuit being pretty much the same people, and it's true. I've been to practically all of the B-sides conferences in the UK this year, and you do see the same people every time. Okay, and I guess it speaks to your point, Ray, about the actual active community in InfoSec is a real microcosm of the wider industry. It's just the same people all the time. That's not a bad thing. But I think, again, to your point, it's high time we started seeing fresh faces and getting new ideas and new experiences involved.
Yeah, now just keep in mind, though, the vast majority of people will never actually necessarily tweet or give a con talk or even be on a panel, right? But they are reading some of those things, right? They are paying attention and learning some of those things. And I think, when we get into some of our our echo chamber type discussions or our micro arguments or whatever about password policies, et cetera. I think we just need to be very cognizant of the fact that there is a entire community of folks out there that are not necessarily speaking, but are definitely listening to us. So
Yeah,
that
agreed.
was kind of my big plug based on that. And I have enjoyed a lot of the other podcasters that have been on here today, but I actually really want to build that up towards kind of something that I'm extremely passionate about and what I'm actually kind of involved in this podcast for. And that is, when we look at statistics, and I'm an American, so pardon me for using American statistics here, when it really would be more applicable to use global ones. But about 1 in 5 people per year get the flu. Okay, so about 20% of the people in the world suffer at some point from the flu. And because of that, we have vaccines, we have hand washing campaigns, we have sanitizers, we have things on the tube that advertise, behaviors and things like that. But 28% of the world population has suffered a mental health issue in the last 12 months.
Yeah,
so
wow.
Think about that statistic, okay? And the vast majority of those 28% of people did not get any treatment at all. They did not go to a doctor. They did not get a medicine. They did not even necessarily talk to a priest or a counselor at all, whatever that is. And ultimately, that really kind of was what brought me to this podcast. Was one of our 2 charities that we're fundraising for is Mental Health Hackers, which is an initiative that Amanda Berlin and some other folks started in order to address this. And by the way, I know we talk a lot about Amanda Berlin, but we can't talk about this without also mentioning people like Jason Street and Danny Akaki and a lot of other folks that were very, very much at the forefront of addressing mental issues in our industry, because our industry has a lot of behaviors that are identified as self-harm, self-medication, gaslighting, imposter syndrome, toxicity, all of those things that a lot of the other podcasters have been talking about. But the one that really, really, really kind of stings, and I think is the elephant in the room, if I can use an American expression. I don't know if that ever took off over there.
We have that one here, yeah.
Okay, very good. And that is that a lot of the folks in our industry, and a shocking number of the folks, both publicly and also privately, have been affected by childhood sexual trauma. So just to give you kind of overall statistics, we're typically talking about 1 in 5 males and 1 in 3 females have had some type of childhood sexual trauma in their lifetime.
Right.
And about 90% of people that have a developmental delay or disability have been sexually assaulted in their lifetime. So you can see that those statistics, first of all, are just absolutely shocking. We're talking about 4 million in the United Kingdom, around 50 million in the USA. But when I was getting ready to talk at the first ever mental health village, it was actually at DerbyCon in 2018, I decided to see what those statistics would look like inside our community. So I went out and hired 2 research firms in the interest of getting a little bit of a scientific way of looking at the same statistics. And I asked them, can you tell me how many people in the hacker community, in the InfoSec community, have been affected by childhood sexual trauma? And the results were extremely surprising, because neither company was able to give me those statistics. Neither company was actually able to come up with something that they considered to be reliable metrics for that, primarily because people don't necessarily answer those surveys, honestly or truthfully or whatever. But what they did tell me, which I think is fascinating, is that if you look at a career matrix, where you would put InfoSec professionals and hackers, et cetera, is probably closest to police officers, psychiatrists, and priests, right? All of which have overwhelmingly disproportionate representation of folks that have been affected by childhood sexual trauma at some point in their life. And so I think that it's safe to say that statistic about 1 in 5 males and 1 in 3 females is probably way, way, way low for our industry. And it is something that, folks like Innocent Lives Foundation and Mental Health Hackers, et cetera, have really, really been talking a lot about. And the reason I'm bringing that up, by the way, is because I know that in the microcosm echo chamber of Twitter, there are still some folks out there that are anti COCs, right? Code of conduct, that are still opposed to that. And I think if you look at that in terms of the statistics that I just gave, you might have a little bit of a different opinion about that, because the vast, if you think about what's going on at a conference, if you realize that up to half the folks there have been affected by assault or trauma in their life, it kind of changes the onus around behaviors. What do you think?
I think that's fascinating, and I think it puts a hell of a lot into perspective. I also think it should probably color the way people think when they're dealing with other people. And I often think about this generally in life, that there's a saying that, don't ever judge people because you don't know what kind of bad day they're having.
Sure.
And when you're trolling people on the web, on Twitter or whatever, or being a dick generally, then you really could be the switch that finishes somebody off as an individual.
For sure.
So I think we all can learn from that, and even if we can't get inside the understanding of how people feel, we should be sensitive to the fact that they aren't necessarily full of beans, and everything isn't necessarily going great for an individual in their life, and we shouldn't compound that problem. I think we should do everything within our power to try and be sensitive to other people's situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I do see progress being made. I mean, I would tell you, again, I'm an old fart, so I've been around for a long time. But I will tell you, I've seen, even in the last 24 months, a lot of the efforts, including this podcast itself, which we're raising money for both a civil rights organization as well as the mental health hackers, etc.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you're listening to this, you can donate right now. The link is right directly in the Twitch. You can just go right now and just donate a few pounds. But anyway,
it was your money.
I do see progress being made there. I mean, I definitely see. I know Deer Farmers does a lot of stuff. The Mini Hats Club does as well. I mean, if you go to YouTube and you type in, InfoSec mental health, you'll see tons of videos from people talking about imposter syndrome and gaslighting and self-harm. And the very, very famous talk that almost everyone should watch was Jason Street's talk at SkyDogCon. Anyway, they're very, very famous because it's his rant about a lot of issues around equality and assault and stuff. So I don't mean to be necessarily a total downer about these types of things, but I do think that it is something that we don't discuss enough. And I will tell you that I think that it probably would behoove us to be a little bit more aware of that, especially when we're talking about using language that might trigger people. I know that there's a big joke to say trigger warning this or trigger warning that, but certain words can actually bring back memories in a way that you may not actually have intended. So
yeah, no,
that's sort of my soapbox. That's my soapbox. Are we getting any donations off that soapbox? Because that would be affirmation.
we haven't yet, but I'm sure people are reaching for their credit cards right now. And if not, we'll come and find them and we'll take their money one way or another. Can I ask you a question, Ray?
Sure.
Do you find that the information that you provided there is really, really interesting and quite scary, actually? Would you say that is representative of InfoSec as a thing, or would you say it's representative of wider technology as an industry, or would you say that it's representative of human life? I mean, is it something that we're seeing as a problem in information security per se, or is it a general problem?
Well, I mean, and I'm not going to necessarily mention any of the previous podcasters that have been on this podcast, but I'll just speak from my own experience.
Sure.
There's a certain generation of us in InfoSec that started out black hats, right? And when I say black hats, I don't mean working for the NSA on CNE and traveling to nation states. I'm talking about cracking Commodore 64 games and dialing BBSs that were in Canada and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of us learn programming languages by defeating copy protection or building game sheets, or I guess in the more current generation, it might be mining gold on massive MMORs or something like that.
Yeah.
So because of the fact that InfoSec has a gray hat or a black hat roots that are out there, you're going to necessarily attract certain people that have had criminal deviances or criminal past, or just this incredible and innate curiosity, right? And in the last 5 or 6 years, we've managed to take back the term hacker, right? So that if you think about books like Marcus Carey's Tribe of Hackers, and you think about a lot of the conferences that now use that in a positive way, et cetera, we've definitely turned the tide, so to speak, at least inside of our industry, on that particular term. But I do think that it is indicative of society overall. It's a very narrow use case, right? Because it takes a special kind of person to want to be involved in this industry, as you know, right?
Of course.
You have to have a little bit of a, I don't want to say a malfunction, but there's certainly the characteristics that are out there, and that's one of the reasons why, when in many cases people talk about the family, the hacker family, right? They immediately get to be have these relations. Well, in many cases, and again, I'm not going to speak for other people, but in many cases, some of our family lives maybe weren't that great, right? With a family of origin or our parents, or step parents, or whatever else that is. So there is a need that can be met by this community, and that certainly does have two sides to it. One is the generosity and the overwhelming support you can get, and then the other one is sort of the infighting and the feuding that typically goes along with the family.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So we just want to be more of the first and less of the second, I guess. Yeah. But I will tell you, I strive to always try to meet people with completely different backgrounds, and it is amazing to me. You've had two people on the podcast in the last 10 hours that were a year or under, or just around a year, and I've already amassed these massive, huge followings and massive networks of people, et cetera. So I don't think it should be intimidating to people based on years of experience.
Yeah.
I don't even think it should be intimidating to people based on whether you can code or whether you can reverse engineer or whether you can social engineer. All of those insecurities and concerns, I think, kind of go to the wayside when you understand, the community at whole and how much diversity that's out there.
Yeah, completely agree.
So originally we were going to talk about predictions. That was the original way that you guys saw me on this, is we were going to talk about 2019 in review and kind of 2020 looking forward. We haven't had a whole lot of that from the other folks, have we? We haven't really gotten any really big ones. But
that's absolutely true. Yep.
I would love to see the death of passwords. I would actually be, that's one of my lifetime goals, is to see somebody really truly put a stake in that one, because even just today we were seeing, Microsoft announced 44 million passwords that were being reused across data breach sites, et cetera. So the credential stuffing is absolutely positively going to work. I think that we will continue to see some progress made. Maybe on multi-factor. American banks are the last ones to embrace it, but I think with some regulations and some laws changing, I think we will probably see a lot more of that. I very much think that we will start to see, and I'm hoping that we will start to see, a much more diverse representation at keynotes, and I will call RSA out right now, because RSA has been criticized very, very much for not having women keynotes. Sure. And this year their keynotes are absolutely amazing. Female lineup on the keynote side. I know Katie Masuris is one of those, and there's a few others. It's a really good lineup. So I think that they have responded to that type of activity and that criticism. And I think the Mini Apps Club is probably going to cross 10,000 members at some point in the year 2020. So
yeah, I think that sounds pretty reasonable to me. And I think and there will be more of the same. Yeah, I think there'll be more breaches, there'll be more nation state badness happening. There'll be more people falling out and more drama, I think, probably on social media. I don't think it's something we're ever going to really get rid of in the world. But we're on the right side of it. So I think as long as we keep doing what we're doing, keep fighting the good fight, we'll get there.
How much do you think election security is going to be in the news for the next in the year 2020? Do you think it'll be a lot or a little?
Probably a lot.
We haven't seen a lot of progress being made there. I don't know if you follow Matt Blaze or Rachel Toback on Twitter, et cetera, but I've seen a lot of discussions, but I haven't seen any laws passed at all, at least not in North America. Yeah. And obviously, when we talk about the influence campaigns and Facebook and some of those other folks, it's rather dicey whether anything is really being done to stop that aspect of it too.
Yeah, no, I agree, completely agree. Okay, well, we're out of time, Ray.
No, that went really, really fast. Please donate. If you're listening to this, even if you're listening to it on replay, please get out your credit cards and donate at least a few pounds, and let's really get this over 10,000 pounds. I have to also just jump in here real quick and say really, really big thanks to the entire AV crew that has been working for 14 hours straight and for 48 hours before that. So this has been a very well done show, and I really do appreciate you guys.
Absolutely. And you wish has come true, Ray. Because Emily Overton has just donated £50. So we've got another £50 in the Beercon one.
Well, thank you, Emily. Thank you very much. I'll match that one right away.
There you go. That's absolutely brilliant. So thank you, Emily. And thank you, Ray, for your insight, your energy, and your involvement in what we're trying to do. Much appreciated. So thanks very much, mate.